Okay. Italy was first for the Renaissance. How can France catch up? Francis I said, they even had something in Italy called the academies, but they were small and local for individual city-states. France thought nationally and globally, and so they created the French Academy for all of France, and to teach, to purify, to administer, and to dominate local dialects and regional accents by having a French Academy of people who were experts on the French language. And you also had roughly then lots of people coming from, later on, from kings, dukes, duchies, lots of high-level people within Germany, within the Habsburg, the Austrian, from Italy, and they all went to Versailles. Or earlier, they went to the Sorbonne. The Louvre became what the Louvre used to be, the court, the king's court that they created Versailles to be outside Paris, and then Fontainebleau to the south, which Francis I created largely. Maybe not. I didn't see it listed in one place there, but whatever. But how can you, the king, engage talent? Well, in terms of the idea of the academies, he started with the French Academy, and then through a couple of centuries, they added the Academy of Science, the Academy of what are all the French academies? You're an expert at that, I guess.
I mean, even l'Académie française, we group different categories. Like even like politicians can enter the l'Académie française. Like Simone Veil, for example, has been in there. There's also a lot of like awards related. They don't.
Yeah, no, not the whole history. What are the other? Just to give science, and I guess one is called social science. Something like that. Okay. Anyway, the point is that the idea of having the power of the political and governmental leaders be at your doorstep. You, the king, will say, or the top administrators will say, you know, we need the best minds in France to work on this. Come work with us. We'll give you more money. Or they've got a lot of money now. They sent, for instance, Alexis de Tocqueville to study crime. And he wrote the best book about America, still today, that we're using. It was one of these academies sent him to France to work, and they gave him funding to do this kind of research. Okay, good idea. You have it in you had it adopted by the Russians, and now all the Chinese. So many other countries of the world with strong political leaders and a strong state want to use the state apparatus, which also you have the universities as official state national universities. It's national. They're all civil servants, national civil servants. Whereas in U.S. everything is fragmented. We have private and public universities. We have different states, and they're all marching to different drummers in that administrative sort of sense. Okay, he wanted to catch up or do better than the Italians. He tried to hire several of the painters, and they refused. He snared probably the best, Leonardo da Vinci. He became the artist of France. He had his own little castle, and he was the artistic advisor to the king. And he brought the Mona Lisa, which is now I was teaching at the Sorbonne, and a guy went running away. He was about half a mile away from the Louvre, and he said to me in German, the bus is about to leave in 20 minutes. I've got to get to the Mona Lisa. Where's the entrance? Auf Deutsch, So I pointed him to the door, and so. He didn't care about all the other paintings there. He wanted to see the Mona Lisa. He only had one, how many days? A couple of days in Paris. He's going back to Germany. Okay, so people bring. So Leonardo brought the, and you know about it it's see what I do? Need to rotate this a little bit, then it doesn't fall off again.
Oh,
Okay, then.
I bought a new one for you.
Okay, here we go. Was this from you, or this was? Because I don't know where it is.
It was attached to the other.
It's attached
to the other power cord.
Okay, but it's working.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay.
Yeah.
That can- So, he then tried military invasion. He conquered and took over Milan. He fought with the people in Naples. They caught him. He was in jail. He was in jail in Naples. The king tried to lead the military troops, and he failed. Okay, still working. Good sign. What he was brilliantly successful was architecture and surroundings, and I would say aesthetics, joined with political intrigue, joined with in terms of you political scientists, a couple of you here, what was the main simple rule of the game for politics then and today in most of the world? Old style Chicago, basic, local. Okay, I'll hesitate for a minute. What's the main simple way of summarizing the political rule of the game? Yes, but of whom? Whom with whom?
The king at the top, and then
The king with the advisors.
yeah.
But what joins them? How do the ideas get connected to? Well, okay. I mean, I'm trying to keep that simple. But the simple idea we call patron-client relations. And so the patron can be the king, or he can be a bartender who supports the people in his neighborhood. So the patron-client has exchanges, and you may give them money, and you want back, say in Chicago, you want votes, you want political support, you want legitimacy, and it comes back through these private goods of particular material, usually in the Irish and the Italian cases that have been the most studied, material physical exchanges. It's not ideas, it's not symbolism, it's not aesthetics, it's okay, jobs and contracts in Chicago. Okay. This came under being challenged in the 19th century with the rise of nationalism and with the rise of things like the German intellectuals created the identity of the nation. Wagner and others, they said, we will, and so the French in turn responded as well. And so you had, or that is through the 19th century, nationalism was enhanced, and the people became more and more legitimate, heightened substantially by the French Revolution. So 1789, in terms of Marx thinking about these things, there used to be a governing class called the aristocracy, linked with the royal family, but about between over 1,000 and 2,000 people had their heads chopped off and on the Place de la Concorde, so hanging with their hair. Here's this duke, this person, and they chopped a lot of heads. Okay, class conflict, yes, indeed. So the follow-up was the continuation of the Versailles court, which was seen as the global court of the world. The people would come from all over to try to become part of having connections with French, but also to see how the French do it. How do they use these ideas? How do they use art, etc.? And political intrigue and patron-client relations were going on. That people would, can you know him, would you get me a favor? I'll give you a favor in turn, etc. was going on all the time. All right, the Governor General of Corsica was an Italian in background, but administered, this was then France, taken over by the French, and he had a son. And when he had a son who got a little bit older, they said, ready to learn, they said, let's go to Versailles, then my son is going to really learn how to do well. And his son was named, 3 guesses? Napoleon. Napoleon learned politics and art and making things work better for you. And he initially was part of the royalty, the king. I mean, that's what his father was a top administrator and connected to the ancien regime. Okay. After that, is my head being chopped over? Is it more or less there?
I think I can pull off a little bit. Yeah,
Pull it. Just pull a little more toward you. Yeah.
I think it works now.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Great. Napoleon then, after the revolution, he chose a new. He embraced the new ideology, egalitarianism. Nevertheless, with the military and the state behind him, he conquered Germany, Austria. They went into, at least they reached part into Russia over to, close to Moscow, so forth. Maybe St. Petersburg, I guess, was etc. Down through Italy, conquering Italy, over to Eastern Europe and to Egypt. And so you stand today in these great pinnacles of towers that came from the Egyptians. They stole it, leaders from the English and the French took graciously through military. Okay, so this domination of the world then, as it was then seen, then became to talk about egalitarianism. And why was Napoleon so successful? Not only was he ruthless, he was less ruthless than many. He had very enthusiastic soldiers. The citizens of France say, we're bringing the future to you here in Germany. But most important, the German intellectuals said, yes, we want it. Hegel, Beethoven, they dedicated their works to Napoleon, the Emperor's Symphony, etc. etc. Hegel's ideas of the rationality, etc. These things went together, and they basically abolished, if you will, many aspects of the feudal order, the feudalism in Germany. And as that continued, that idea that the citizen and egalitarianism, liberty, equality, and fraternity were the 3 marching words of the French army and of the French republicanism, anti-kings, led to this sense of the people are part of the nation. And then I'll flash forward in a sense when we get to social media, the iPhone, this democratization and which we're reading about with the new political culture, substantially has been heightened in the recent, last 20, 30 years, thanks to iPhones and so for something like the Soviet Union or Putin or the Chinese leaders or North Koreans, they often successfully perform trying to appeal to the average citizens in ways they're listening to the leaders in ways that how these can work in a way that can be seen and can be what am I doing here? Okay, so one way to make things responsive and then
1400s, they controlled much of France, including Paris. France was at a low ebb, and its kings retreated here to the Loire to rule what remained of their realm. When the threat finally subsided, and the kings returned to Paris, many of their Loire castles became lavish country estates.
France rebounded and eventually tossed the English back to England. Still, the French kings continued to live in the Loire region for the next 2 centuries, having grown comfortable with the chateau culture of the region. The climate was mild, hunting was good. Dreamy rivers made nice reflections. Wealthy friends lived in similar luxury nearby, and the location was close enough to Paris, but still far enough away. For France, the 16th century was a kind of cultural golden age. With relative peace and stability, there was no longer a need for fortifications deep within the country. The most famous luxury hunting lodges, masquerading as fortresses, were built during this period.
Extravagant chateaus like these did.
Okay, well, actually, let it continue to play. I'll put the sound down. So it's still, no, keep playing.
They were the fancy of the economic
I wanna
elites, insiders who controlled the workings of the French economy. Of course, that all changed with the French Revolution, when the working class rose up, chased the bankers and financiers off their estates, and ransacked many of their palaces.
Today, scores of these castles and palaces have been restored and are open to visitors. Modern-day aristocratic chateau owners struggling with the cost of upkeep enjoy financial assistance from the
Okay,
government
that works.
if they open.
Or let's try that, see if we're not too noisy. You get to see the great pictures and the ideas. So we've got to join the ideas. The castles were the most fantastic in the world ever since. Picked up by the Disney company in their multiple Disney, what do you call them? Parks, yeah, parks are Disneyland, Disney place, whatever. California, Florida, Japan, China, they're all around, and they have French chateaus of the Loire, especially like these. They look pretty much like this. So these are the highest symbol that civilization has ever achieved. They did better than the Italians. Okay, finally. So this sense of competition in military and economic and innovation, but also proud and beauty as an aesthetic dimension was important, and the French used this clearly from here's Leonardo.
The king sent Leonardo up Clos-Lucé, a small mansion just down the street.
Okay.
In 1516, Leonardo da Vinci left Rome, accepted the position of engineer, architect, and painter to France's Renaissance king.
Okay. So that's his
The
house.
64-year-old Leonardo
Okay.
spent his last 3 years
So
Clos-Lucé aptly recreates the everyday atmosphere Leonardo enjoyed while
what I'm adding, flashing forward and back with you, is the egalitarianism, symbolism, aesthetics, the art. France was doing these in many ways as leaders of the world in showing the others how to do it and succeeding, and in their minds they were the world leaders. Certainly with 1789, with the French Revolution, they were world leaders, and with Napoleon spreading it. After that, got a little more dicey. they fought over the 19th century between the red and the black, et cetera, and so forth. But the chateaus stand, and they're imitated in Disney worlds the world over, and the sense of aesthetics, and then of using the academies as major sources of funding and of linking power with ideas. And so in a sense of having, but also not having competition, if you will, that is the American and German model of competition among ideas in their own right, and having professional associations and individual universities arguing with each other is in conflict with the academy model, which is more strictly responsive to the king. So we have mixtures in between. We'll talk about this as we go on, such things as having. You were getting into that. Giving prizes. So let me have one more bit when we connecting big themes globally, including China now. There's several readings in which we're talking about. And so just looking at readings in these sections, one big concept is Bohemia. Okay. So let me feed into this. We're going over the syllabus. Remember, I sent you out an email. Follow the syllabus. Not the order of the campus is a mess. Should follow the syllabus. Look for those things you need on Canvas, but follow. Okay. So I'm following the syllabus, and we've been through the first section on leadership. We've gone through. We're now in political culture. We have Elazar, these three types within the U.S. And I'll just add as a footnote briefly, Elazar is about 40 books, and four of them are around the rise of the covenant society, the model of it's a new model of the political system, directly countering patronage and clientelism, and instead. The covenant was the model, and who's read it either from here or know this from elsewhere. What was the covenant in Elazar, and why is this so important for us today? Historically, what's the origin? The Sermon on the Mount in the Bible. We have the Jews were in Egypt. They were slaves. They tried to get away, and the waters opened, and they got through somehow back to Palestine, to the Holy Land. And our leader went up to the mountain and met with God. And God, this was the Sermon on the Mount, and he gave a covenant to the Jewish people to lead the world. And including the 10 Commandments, which must be followed, and that was the new law, and the sense that this God defined right and law and political leadership and power were all together, and it should not be bottom up. It's not from the people. It's not from an academy. It's not from military might. It's the right thing, and it's God defined. Okay. That sense of righteousness we have in the Elazar types. So in a sense, it's the covenant society. The most pure versions were then Calvinism with the Swiss and the Dutch, because they're heavily Calvinist societies in northern Germany, bits of Scandinavia, little bits of England. Within the U.S., this was New England, but this is not Wall Street. This is not the American South. They fight with the New Englanders. But the New Englanders are saying, God is on our side. And if Donald Trump is a sinner, he will be punished. And we will tell you through the New York Times. Okay, so the righteousness in following prophets. There's Max Weber's one great book is called the ancient Judaism, and the main figure here was the ancient prophets, the most important of which was named Jesus Christ. Christianity is Jewish. Okay, so Christianity, these ancient prophets were many of them. And so Max Weber wrote about them to try to make sense of these as new forms of using ideology and moralism is a term used by Elazar, by Lipset, by Wildavsky, and so forth. In the book by Who Governs, how does this fit? Where is there a covenant, or where do we have? We didn't have it on the board, but it was. He calls it the American Creed. The American Creed is Dahl's version of this, and it's nationalism in that sense. But it's not everything about waving the flag. It's more specifically a set of rules of the game for politics, and it doesn't say you can't steal, you can't use violence, you can't use force, so forth. That is, it's a sense of moderation, and these things are being discussed now a lot as we're getting to elections, but has been discussed much more actively since 2016 with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has broken the rules that have come down in the 19th and early 20th century. So he's broken them enough that this is leading people to say, what's right and what's wrong, and how far can you push it, and that these are the issues which you can see more visibly when you get someone fun. This is a classic Durkheimian idea. If you want to really understand the law, look how the criminals are punished, and the ones that are really, if they get their heads chopped off, it must be a basic value. That's how you can measure basic values, by taking the French Penal Code, and you can measure the strength of the enforcement, and you can quantify the seriousness of the power of the values before you had any polls or surveys. Okay, that's what Durkheim did. The paper by Maxime Jaffray and called More Bullshit on the Hood. Bolshoi is why is Bolshoi there? Bolshoi is an artistic symbol of hierarchy. The classic ballet, which again started by the Italians, the French took it over. Versailles, Louis XIV, and others, they would arise. The first thing they would do in the day, they get dressed, so forth, and come into the dressing of the king would be first thing. But soon after that was ballet. The king himself would do ballet and practice. Okay, and ballet, there have been papers here by students and so forth. Ballet is perhaps one of the most hierarchical, disciplined structures of right and wrong. And so it gives you a sense for the military and for political leadership, follow the rules. And you see this in the Olympic Games of China in Beijing, where you can see the welcoming of the Chinese with hundreds of drummers, doing in unison. And you can look at things on YouTube and the other things now. The Chinese are fantastically talented. They have you can have 50 little dancers in unison, in complement. They make flowers. There's a discipline in doing that with aesthetic elegance that the Americans don't know how to do that kind of stuff. Okay. So Richard Florida, getting the next big section of the course. It's called Urban Innovation. How do new ideas drive cities economically and culturally? Okay, so Florida's book, earlier, the title that made him famous is called The Rise of the Creative Class. When he gave it to the publisher, they didn't use that word. The publisher added it on. Florida said, but I don't talk about class in this book. So that doesn't matter, it'll sell books. So he used it, but there's no class analysis to speak of, really. What he talks about is Bohemia and Jane Jacobs, and then some others but especially Jane Jacobs. And then he went through a careful review of the literature on offices, on state governments, on universities, on many different fields. He shows what really matters to the drivers for the economy, for innovation, for promotion in the university is new ideas. Artists have, artists will have manifestos. The Bauhaus tradition means this. This is what, or Andy Warhol. This is the art. This is really the art. Okay. So in this sense, to use the economic paradigm, simpler, clear, if you will, instead of capital being land, labor, and land labor management, the innovation style is to say, the knowledge is the new foundation of the modern economy. This is, in a sense, it's the post-agricultural, post-industrial, post-materialist. This was one term that Engelhardt used. The post-materialist revolution was to say, it's not just having an exchange of money and jobs, it's ideas, it's innovations, it's how to do things, including beauty, things that, but then when we also get to the moralism saying, you can't be clientelist, you can't just give money to your daughter and son, you'll go to jail. Okay, if you do that, and this is a revolution just 20, 30 years ago, still in Chicago or most of the world, this is still obviously highly contested with the Biden family, Trump family, etc. Even in this so-called particularly moralistic country, we've got huge exceptions and battles over it politically to try to say, how can we justify it or not, etc. Okay, so the what I'm giving you is a transformation within France and in the world, but with one way of illustrating this in the paper with Maxime Geoffrey is to contrast the South, or let's say other places outside Paris. That is when I've been teaching in France, I've helped to organize conferences where we have people from how do you make decisions? How much are the academies? How much is it the French bureaucracy in Paris? How much are things happening locally? And when Mitterrand was prime minister, one of his biggest policies was called decentralization. We want to give the local mayors and local officials more autonomy, and this is a hot issue today in China and in many other places. With Reagan, with Thatcher, these issues of the role of cities and were politicized in ways that transformed this. And the French said we will do this, but the question was who has done it and how much and where and why. And so one of the leading sociologists in Paris was Pierre Bourdieu, B-O-U-R-D-I-E-U. Do I need to run the name? You don't. Well, look at the paper which we have here on and we have Maxime. Maxime studied with 4 different centers in Paris, including Bourdieu, and then he went to the initial collaborator of Bourdieu, who went to Marseille. And Marseille and Paris have 2 drastically different, in terms of France, political cultures. And the Paris and the Bourdieu theory is everything is top down, and or at least it's not bottom up. And so you have 2 classes to simplify, sort of the above and the high and the low. You have high culture and low culture. We have ballet, and we have, you know, Edith Piaf, or you have rock, and so forth. And Bourdieu simply ignored popular culture. It's bad, or it's something which you don't study if you want to understand the real French. Okay. His collaborator, Jean-Claude Passeron, went to Marseille and started this alternative view. We include popular culture. We include the people. We also can have bottom-up as well as top-down inside France. And if we talk to mayors, mayors are doing it, including outside Paris. And if you look at places like Avignon, cities like Grenoble, many of them, cities that were growing in terms of people moving there, migrating in terms of visiting. Then we flash forward to rural areas in China. A hot theme now is called cultural tourism in China. The French have been doing this for about 500 years. But the Chinese are discovering this. Instead of just talking about Marx or using clientelism or just using the strong state or the Little Red Book, there's this sense, hey, we've got Chinese citizens and they can go wherever they want, and let's give them more options, including parks that will have a model of true Chinese culture, which gives something to be proud about as Chinese. These are old French and Italian kinds of traditions. Okay, so what we have is to show this with a bunch of measures today, contrasting Paris, and shows how much Paris is still the top-down model and Marseille is bottom-up. And then others are in between, like Avignon, Aix-en-Provence, and so forth, mostly in the south, and where they have big festivals. They have, you know, people, they may have a small, maybe, I don't know, 30,000 people in one of these cities. They'll go up to 100,000 over weeks and weeks and weeks of festivals of classical music, of ballet, of different kinds of, and they'll bring in people from around the world in massive numbers. It's cultural tourism writ large, and as do to some degree the Spaniards, the Greeks, the Italians. Okay, so this is very new stuff for the Northern Europeans, for the Americans. They haven't thought about that. We don't have any data on it. We don't have any serious ways of thinking. Whereas in the Italian university, you can get a PhD in economics and tourism, PhD in political science and tourism, sociology and tourism, you know, architecture and tourism. That is, tourism is big, big stuff. It's the #1 driver of the economy in most and it's rising in China as well and around the world, but it hasn't been systematized and studied at all comparably. Okay, it's happening. So I want to, well, okay. I hate to interrupt stuff like that. We can't match that. 31st Street in Chicago. If you have, from what I sent out, take a look. Okay, well. I'll give, as I said, there's one or two pictures in each of these books that are really big ideas. One big idea here, the city's an entertainment machine. We have here what I gave you in words, the idea of the classic factors of production, land, labor, capital, and management, lead to economic growth. This is page 99, and this is in the. I think I sent this out in the readings as well as in what I sent out. This leads to economic growth and it leads to population attracting them to jobs. That's the driver of the economy, classically, 19th century, Marshall, etc. Next box, Model 2, is Gary Becker and the Chicago folks on human capital. Human capital. Okay, it's not just having land and money. You've got to have ideas. You've got to have new techniques, and those come from human capital. Okay. Model 3 is what the economists started with amenities and talking about these amenities, which we'll continue here back and forth. But what we do with scenes is not to have one amenity like one chateau or one film or movie theater. We have hundreds of these. And so if we want to see how can we bring Leonardo to France, how can we have, the Louvre bringing cultural tourism to the nice parks and to come and visit Beijing and Shanghai and so forth? And where do they go on their Chinese holidays where they can choose? The whole set of amenities are critical. Okay, so all three of these are working. None of these have replaced. They've been joined together, and they're all going on today. They're all going on simultaneously. They're not in conflict. They're simply making a more sophisticated model about how the pieces hold together. Okay, that's the idea of the city as an entertainment machine. This doesn't mean that we stop having stock markets or things which are in cities, or transportation or whatever, but we add consumption, entertainment, cultural tourism, and this is being discovered by cities, by nations, by travel agents, and by you as average citizens. Okay, so if that's one big point in this work. Another one I'll just point out to page 29. How strongly do these different, I put things on the board, A, B, C, D. What causes A, B, C, D? What causes economic growth? Many people, used to say, or Marshall said land, labor, capital, and management. Okay. If we look to the diversity discussions today, race, class, gender, sexual orientation, and the like, how powerful are these? How can we compare these? So the new political culture is the rise of diversity, we could say. It's the rise of these social issues, including diversity. How strong are all these explaining economic growth in terms of jobs, for instance? Okay, if we measure these on page 29 with basic values and moral orientations. Think of the Sermon on the Mount and so forth. And we measure these with income. Which of the following categories does your annual household income fall? Second, education. Third, age. Fourth, occupation. Fifth, African American. This is just U.S. data. It's called the DDB. These are the main data used by Putnam. So we reanalyzed some of this to explore these. It's a big N, like 40, maybe 40,000 people over a number of years. National sample services. Okay, dependent variables are here. How powerful are each of these things in explaining? I am a favor of legalized abortions. The government should restrict imported products. I rode a bicycle in the last 12 months. How often? I gambled in a casino. I attended church or other place of worship. Went to a classical concert. Went clothes shopping. Went to a club meeting. So Putnam loved these because you can measure Tocqueville civic associations, religious associations, and you can see how often, which are more engaged in terms of these organizations, or how much are they going down. All this is in here, and you can measure it. But what the reason of this table is to say how strong, how big is the A, B, C, D, and then we can have what's called an adjusted R squared. How strong is all of these together if you do a multiple regression? This is a simple statistic, and it says how much shared variance, how much do these things, are they explained, how much are the dependent variables explained by these independent variables? Race, class, income, education, age. And the answer is, how strong are these things? Question. These are what you're learning by watching the media and what you're showing and seeing in most sociology journals, most economics journals, most political science journals. They use these things. Education, occupation, so forth. Race. How strong are these relationships? These may be simple R's, but if we put them together, we still get that is, we see these right here. The highest ones are about 0.20. The shared variance between the two variables, if you take income and how much are you in favor of legalized abortion, it's minus it's 0.16, it's plus. So more affluent people are more in favor of abortion. Education, 0.16, same thing. Okay. If you ask for shared variance, you multiply 0.16 times 0.16. If you multiply for 20, if you multiply 0.2 times 0.2, that's 0.04. What that says is 4% of the variance is shared. That is, income explains abortion by 4%. Only 4% of the degree to which people who are in favor of abortions are higher in income. 4%. And you add all these up, that's the R squared. You just said R squared. And so bottom line of this is there's a lot of uncertainty. We do not live in a deterministic world. Even if political leaders and the New York Times and some professors and certainly some novelists and artists will say it's all about money, or it's all about race, or it's all about gender. Answer is no. You can't explain abortion, went bowling, rode on a bicycle, going to church. These things are made, sometimes include things which are not these, including, for example, aesthetics, ideology, religion, many things, nationalism. These matter along with these other things, but they still are relatively low. That is, each individual and each political leader, including mayors, including presidents of countries, have got a fair amount of leeway to make decisions. Leadership matters. There's room for leadership. Nothing is totally deterministic. Okay. So these are the two big findings, I would say, in this book, and which we build on in turn in the other stuff. Go ahead, Pam.
I guess when kind of measuring those things, how do you deal with the reverse causality issue? Because it seems like
we can't. I mean, it's not that there's nothing wrong with our data. That is, if we have the data, and what ideally we do this in the Scenescapes book. If we have data for some things over time, so we can say if we have the neighborhood or an individual has become more affluent, if we want to see how much does an increase in income, does that lead to more people in the neighborhood or more of those or individuals as they rise? Does that increase their tolerance or their support for abortion? And so or if we're noticing changes over time, even a little more so, we can see that Americans have gotten a lot more tolerant in the last 30, 40 years about all kinds of things, abortion, about race, about gender, etc. But what causes what is much more tricky. So the one first basic simple step is if we've got data for the same units, ideally, over time, then we can analyze that. And so there's a section here, we call it the chicken and egg problem. What's the cause and what's the, so to speak, your term was what? Reverse
Causality.
Yeah, reverse causality. I mean, what causes what? Or most specifically, say, chicken and egg kind of thing. That both are there, and the same thing happens again and again and again and again. But and it's not that any of these are wrong. It's just that it depends where you get the first measures, and then it may be that it goes one direction, and then we'll have people go the other way. So we have the new political cultures reacting against hierarchy, but then after we have Bill Clinton and Tony Blair and Mitterrand and the socialist parties embrace these new issues, you can then get a Bernard Sanders who comes back and says, we want to be progressives. We don't want this Bill Clinton. We want Bernard Sanders. That is, we want more. And so in this sense, these things can be fighting against each other and reacting against going one direction, such in terms of the impacts of any of these variables. I won't try to get into too much. We don't. That is, I want to say explicitly, no one is required to have had a course in statistics or anything like this. You can be a first-year college student, second-year college student with no training in that, but you at least you can get a feel for what we're talking about. And what you can get as a feel is that these are ways you can measure them, and if we have the data that are right, which can be plugged into these models, then you can show the magnitude of these effects like A, B, C, and so forth. And that's why we use with things like this one term for this is path analysis. We have these paths or boxes and arrows. I don't write equations. Equations tend to get people, oh, I can't do that. But if we have a little box and arrow, you can all do this. Okay. So, I've mentioned, the Kentuckyville karaoke. I'll give you a very brief summary, and then try to link these pieces together a little bit more. Urban innovation. The book Kentuckyville has two dependent variables which are not both in the title. One is citizen participation, the other is economic development. So Kentuckyville karaoke, the idea is the arts can really make a difference with citizen participation. And that's what we're seeing on the screen here. The arts can also combine with education, with these, and lead to more economic development. And one of the findings near the beginning, we've got a couple of different places in different books. I won't try to cite one place here, but the arts can drive economic growth more than any other single variable when you use 30,000 plus zip codes in the U.S. That is, if we says, what increases the increase in the number of jobs, total jobs, all zip codes in the U.S., a change, what leads to growth in jobs? Income, education, occupation, investment, and so forth. Immigration, many kinds of factors. Number one is arts jobs. Number of arts jobs is, now, the question then is, how do you interpret this? What does more arts jobs mean? Is it reverse causation? In part, yes. But if we get data over time, we can sort that out a little bit more. These are, in a sense, and that's, to some degree, we can say, well, in part technical and data issues, but at least we can see how they can be tested and analyzed. The big news was, if we look at how the arts are on the rise and have a big impact on on economic development and on citizen participation. I can point to the French Revolution, Napoleon, these chateaus, etc., as examples of French governments using these powerfully and successfully. The question in the title is, can Tocqueville karaoke? Does Tocqueville work when we go to Asia? And so the book, if you take a look at the cover, it is about 14 co-authors, and they're mostly Asians. They're Chinese, they're Koreans, they're Japanese. There are also a couple of Portuguese and Brazil are included, because Portuguese and Brazil fail to work as Tocqueville, that is, when I say work in simple terms, what's the simplest way of mentioning this is, if we look at, we summarize Tocqueville over here. We have arts, citizen participation. What does citizen participation in turn do that Tocqueville really stressed? It builds trust. Okay, trust and legitimacy. Okay. This works, this path, instead of saying work, if I say A, this path A is strong in Sweden, Denmark, Norway, England, US, Australia. If you go to Portugal, it's 0. If you go to Spain, it's still positive. Spain and Portugal are different on this, which is very interesting. You go to Asia, and it's usually 0 or very low. That is, Tocqueville does not work in Asia. Why not? That's the point of the book. So we spent about 7 years talking, meeting, writing papers, arguing, cross-checking our data, looking at each other's results, and so forth. And one of the answers is to try to is to try to refine the dynamics in a way which will better incorporate the meaning of the arts, or the meaning of participation, or the meaning of trust within the Asian context, either one label for all, or context if we contrast, say, the different Asian countries. And so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, except to say I'll give you one example. Simple one. Simple, statistically simple, but subtly an important question, which in turn asked. If you look at the first one I read to you back here, we have people who are higher in income, they support abortion in the US. Same thing in Western Europe. You go and you also have, as I mentioned, you have higher in income, higher in education in US and Western Europe. You also have more citizen participation and more trust. When you go to China, what do you find? The opposite. The young, highly educated computer science students in China trust the national government less than do people who are less educated, less in income. So the lower educated rural peasant farmers still at least say, and we've got there are dozens, there are not dozens, there are hundreds of papers on this. And I worked especially with several of these Chinese students to try to make sense, because the simple answer that the crude critics say is that the Chinese state or the Communist Party, the police, people are so scared they have to say they trust the government. So there are people. There are many solutions. I mean, you can do surveys of foreign students, of Chinese Americans. You can study Chinese students from China when they're in Chicago or Oxford or something like that. So there are many things that people have done to overcome that. They get the same results. That is the people. I mean, sometimes the term in Florida is used. The creative class in China is not working in Tocquevillian way. And so where and why might it or might it be changed? That's here, another hot term here comes in, cultural policy. How can we have cultural policy which works better? How can we have cultural tourism which builds a sense of pride in being Chinese? I'm very proud to be Chinese. I want to see the Great Wall. I want to see, the great, et cetera, et cetera. So where and how do these things work become big issues, and look at what we have in the pictures. These are the kinds of things which have been used for centuries. And another place where they, well, okay, I won't go around too much. I'll keep some of the narrow, simpler, clear results, and I'll simply then say, let's look at one or two exceptions. That's, in a sense, it's an exception. You can say the Asians there. Another big exception, many people talked about when I say people who are higher in income, higher in education, higher in race. This is whites versus blacks, or brown, but you can have others in between if you want. But can we say that the arts are really working and culture is, and bohemia and the like, these things are good for elites. These aren't the real Americans. These aren't the people who are supporting with the red hat. Let's make America great again. Do those people also respond to the, maybe not necessarily to Beethoven, but do they respond to certain kinds of music? And where might these, can we get any more subtlety and any ways of thinking about along these lines? Okay, so we published some of these books. We just brought out the Scenescapes book. And we had an inquiry from the staff of a guy named Theaster Gates. How many of you ever heard of Theaster Gates before? I've mentioned this. Probably none of you have ever heard of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
now, what you heard about it?
I know his art. I actually just, I was surprised to see his name in an article in the reading there. I didn't get a chance to read it, unfortunately, but he's a very prominent artist. I mean, his work's even like in the Keller Center. It's around the school quite often.
Okay, so you've seen it around the campus.
Yes.
Okay. But that's local stuff. In Venice, in the Biennale, there's an international competition among all the artists in the world. He was voted the most popular, important, influential artist in the world a couple of years ago. There are shows he's putting on in London, in Australia, in Beijing, I think. I mean, he's done all around the world. He is very, very popular. Why is he so important? It's not because he's doing beautiful. He's not a Leonardo. He's not a Renoir. He's not a brilliant artist. He's not. But he also does real estate development. He also does gentrification, if you will. He tries to help people who are poor make a little more money. He tries to help them. Poverty, he's solving the poverty problems for poor blacks. the Great Society programs of Jack Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson and so forth, many people said it failed. You know, most of these programs, they're made for middle-class Americans and they don't work in Bronzeville, etc. So what Theaster Gates is, I mean, he's brought up, he's what is, I don't know, 50s, something like that. And as he doesn't go back to Lyndon Johnson, he's doing something, he's doing some things. And they heard about what we're doing. He invited me and students, eventually we got some students involved. We had 4 students did master's theses. 4 people did 4 aspects of what he was doing. One of them went to some of the sessions which they had a black film showings and then discussions of those. Another one is on the bank, an old bank that's renovated into yoga and other kinds of sessions. Is there a problem with that?
No.
Yoga, other kinds of things. Below, he makes videos. He talks about this stuff. These are, you know, even the TED Talk, a PBS, this kind of stuff. Then he was doing this stuff, but then note that the comments, he says, after 15 minutes, this is sort of biographical one, this one, on the so-called 9 principles. He decided he really needed to have a program, something like the Bauhaus or the Artist Manifesto, you know, of what I'm doing and who am I? I'm Theaster Gates. You know, what am I doing? He talked to our 4 students at the USC, and they read about these other books, and they put this stuff together. So he has called the 9 principles of ethical redevelopment. How to be better, how to follow the 10 Commandments, how to use yoga to where you don't just make the body better. It's a sort of Oprah Winfrey talking through the problems in life, which each of the persons do for 10 minutes before they do yoga together. They're helping with popular psychoanalysis, and it's on the mat. Okay, so these kinds of things, but that is Theaster Gates. Let me maybe make an example. He started with no money. His father was a roofer. You know, he put tar on roofs. He didn't have any money. He had a BA, and he had a BA in pottery. He had a little bit. I think he got a master's in public administration at some point there. Something like that. He lived in a neighborhood where he was next door to a place of an abandoned house. The abandoned house was for sale for something like $12,000. He didn't have $12,000. He borrowed some money from his mother, from his sister. He went from the loan to the bank. He got a mortgage for some of it, and he bought the house. He then put in his own money, his own sweat equity. He fixed it up. He made it beautiful. He's an artist. Sense of making it attractive. He did it beautifully, and it was worth a lot. And so many people would say, oh, you sell the money and you make a profit, and you go to the bar and celebrate. No. He didn't celebrate it. He didn't sell it. He made it into an open house that the neighbors could come and use. He had books on the walls, and then he put on showings of black films. And then they'd have people talking about what's black culture. We ought to be proud of our black culture and do it in a way that really is interesting and so forth. So this in turn grew into more and more activities, restaurants, people buying his paintings, etc. Oops, we're near the end. Okay, we're making good progress. We've gone through C and D, and we're down here to E, which is for weeks 3 and 4, and we will stop there. I have not officially waited for you to ask questions, perhaps because of last week. But that is, we can have a lot of discussion if we do it the right way, and we've seen that. But when we've got things we do want to cover from the readings, or when we don't have as much questions from you, I'll talk more. Okay. That's it for now. Thank you. We'll see you on Monday.